Somewhat strangely, as we edge closer and closer to the F1 2026 season and its radical regulation reset, there has been almost no meaningful discussion about McLaren or their drivers at all, despite the fact that they are the reigning world champions. Lando Norris won the 2025 Drivers' Championship, McLaren took the Constructors, and yet, in a paddock that never shuts up, they've been oddly absent from the conversation. Instead, the focus has drifted elsewhere. We've had endless debate around Mercedes and Red Bull allegedly exploiting an engine compression ratio grey area. We've heard constant noise about Adrian Newey supposedly reshaping Aston Martin's entire technical philosophy and optimizing their wind tunnel infrastructure. We've seen Audi and Cadillac complete private shakedowns with early 2026 spec machinery. We've even had liveries revealed by Red Bull, RB and others. But McLaren? Silence. Their drivers? Even quieter. And that silence is precisely why this conversation matters, because beneath the surface, I think Oscar Piastri is heading into 2026 in a position that quietly works against him in both possible scenarios. Last season, the 2025 Drivers' Championship was supposed to be a straight fight between Norris and Piastri. For the first half of the year, it genuinely looked like Piastri already had one hand on the title. He was composed, consistent, clinical, and at one point the most convincing driver in that McLaren garage, and then it slipped away. He bottled it. Not only did Norris overhaul him, Piastri didn't even finish second. He ended the season third in what should have been a two-horse race. And in Formula One, how you lose can matter almost as much as how you win. Now, I know some people will hear this and think it sounds overly dramatic. They'll say Piastri is only 24 years old. They'll say 2025 was his first real championship fight. They'll argue he might actually have a higher ceiling than Norris, more complete, more adaptable, more rounded. They'll insist that more opportunities will come, and in isolation, all of that sounds reasonable. But Formula One is not a sport that operates on patience or fairness. It is ruthless, hierarchical, and deeply political, and sometimes you only get one real window before the narrative hardens around you. We're now entering a completely new regulation cycle. Yes, McLaren are expected to be near the front again. They're running Mercedes power, and they've built one of the strongest aerodynamic departments on the grid. But there is still a subconscious expectation throughout the paddock that Mercedes themselves could reassert dominance, just like they did at the start of the turbo hybrid era. And that context matters, because whether people like it or not, Norris now enters 2026 with a status Piastri does not have. He's not just one of the four world champions expected to be on the 2026 grid, he is the reigning world champion. He's carrying the number one on his car, and that carries weight. It affects perception. It affects internal dynamics. It affects whose voice is heard. If people already suspected Norris benefited from subtle team favoritism in 2025, ask yourself what changes when he is now the champion who beat Piastri and Verstappen, who has been at McLaren since 2019 and who is the longest-serving driver in the team's history, 152 Grand Prix, more than Coulthard, more than Button. Whether McLaren want to admit it or not, Norris's words will carry more authority now. If Norris and Piastri disagree on development direction, who do you think the team subconsciously leans toward? The driver who delivered them a title, or the driver who faded when it mattered most? If another team order situation arises, the old papaya rules excuse of equal status becomes much harder to sell. Norris is no longer just a contender, he is the champion. Slight preference doesn't have to be explicit to be real. The culture will tilt, the media framing will tilt, the marketing will tilt. Norris will be positioned as the face, the leader, the proven quantity. And no matter how often McLaren say both drivers are equal, the structure around them will quietly say otherwise. And that's why this isn't even about Piastri simply needing to beat Norris in 2026. Because unless Oscar Piastri wins the 2026 Drivers' Championship outright, I genuinely struggle to see a scenario where he ever becomes the undisputed number one at McLaren while Norris is still there. In hindsight, the 2025 title fight wasn't just about a championship, it was a power struggle. It was the moment that would decide who McLaren would build around long term. If Piastri had maintained his early season form, avoided the second half collapse, and become world champion in just his third F1 season, the entire narrative flips. Norris, in his seventh year, would have been beaten by a younger, less experienced teammate. Questions would have been asked, pressure would have mounted, and McLaren would almost certainly have started shaping the team around Piastri instead. But that didn't happen. Norris won. And because of that, it is Piastri who now finds himself exposed. Looking ahead, with Fernando Alonso likely entering his final F1 season in 2026 at the age of 44, I wouldn't be remotely surprised if Aston Martin begin monitoring Piastri closely. And depending on how Ferrari's situation evolves, whether Hamilton retires or Leclerc moves on, they too could have him firmly on their radar for 2027. Because while it might sound premature right now, I genuinely believe that 2026 will quietly reveal something important. That Piastri and McLaren may be approaching the beginning of the end. Not because Oscar Piastri isn't good enough, but because in Formula One, timing is everything. And sometimes missing your moment is all it takes for the sport to move on without you.